Hey guys, I'm Michael Essa, and this is my shop, Essa Autosport, located in Anaheim, California. I drift professionally in Formula D, but I also have this shop where we work on my own cars, other drift cars, and a lot of customers' Porsches. So we've been working on this project with FCPEuro and Bilstein and Liqui Moly for about 3-4 months now, and we basically took a 2016 340i and stripped it down to nothing, and we're turning it into what's going to be an awesome drift car. So here's the F30 chassis that just came back from paint. We can see the kind of mods that we had to do to get this thing to work. With the WiseFab steering angle kit here, basically just rolled the seam back. It was facing forward before, so we hammered all that back to get more tire clearance here. Same thing on the top. We got that rolled up a bit. Notched a section out of the top here for the WiseFab camber plates. It moves the shock from somewhere in the middle here all the way to the outside to get better geometry at big angle. We've got the Bilstein Evo R coilover kit from an A90 Supra, and they already come with iBox springs. Bilstein, as you know, only uses the best stuff, but the spring rates are too high. They're made for a road race car, and the rear shocks were actually a separate spring and shock configuration, and we're going to a full coilover. The bodies are already threaded, so basically we just called up iBox and sent them some specs of what we need and a spring rate range, and they're here today and brought these down, so we're going to get it all dialed in. So it's a bit of a mess now. There's parts, we just stripped the entire car down, so we've got the quick change diff sitting over here. The subframes and all the sheet metal stuff are out at the powder coaters, getting all that stuff coated. And we've got the Enki wheels and the GT radial tires for the car sitting over here. All of the suspension components, the fuel cell, bodywork, front end stuff with the intercooler, just tons of bits and pieces scattered about. And you can see that we've got the Bilstein Evo R A90 Super Kit, and they don't come with these collars. Bilstein sent us these so we could convert it to a full coilover, and that's because in the back of the car, the rear suspension, the WiseFab kit doesn't have a provision for a separated spring in the lower control arm like the factory car does. So now we've got to convert this to the full coilover, which is where all of these iBox springs come into play. So it's kind of an oddball size that not a lot of companies make. It's a 2-inch short 5-inch spring, and so we've got a lot of goodies in here. We've got new springs for the front and a bunch of springs for the rear. So pretty small, cute little springs, but these are going to work out really well. There's not a lot of clearance in the back of the car against the body where the shock sits. So with this 2-inch ID spring, we'll have plenty of clearance. And these things are really easy to swap the springs out on, so we can dial the car in quickly, get it to work the way we want it to, without having to spend a ton of time taking the car apart and putting it back together. We can swap springs out in about 10 minutes. These bearings here allow everything to rotate freely, and they hold a ton of load, so you're not going to smash these bearings flat. And with this whole setup on here, everything can move freely, and as it compresses, it won't add any extra bind to the suspension. Got a couple small mods in the engine compartment. There's a little bit more section of sheet metal here that we cut off, and this will be for the intake manifold to the intercooler. So that extra clearance there, and then the turbo sits right about here, so we have room for the turbo elbow to come off. And a little bit of massaging right here for the exhaust manifold to fit. And the reason we had to do that, we're running a dock race exhaust manifold, but we lowered the engine and pushed it back. So it's about 1.5 inches lower and about probably 1.5 inches further back from the factory position. So got the weight balance and the car moved back and lower a bit. So that should help the car be a little bit more competitive and easier to drift. So one of the reasons that we chose this chassis was because it comes with a B58 from the factory. So That's going to be like the new hot motor. Papadakis Racing has taken that Supra, which is a B58, and made over 1,000 horsepower with it already. So it's a very capable engine, and knowing that this car is a 2016 and this engine comes in 4 or 5 different model BMWs for quite a few years, there's going to be a big aftermarket push for it, and not just on aftermarket parts, but for replacement parts. So that was one reason, and the other reason was the chassis is actually almost identical to a Supra. It's just a lot longer. So WiseFab already has all the suspension components for it. Bilstein already makes a set of Evo R coilovers for an A90 Supra. Those bolt right up. So we didn't go too crazy with this build. We had a very short amount of time to do it. But I think it's going to be a very, very good car. And then the inside of the car, as you can see, is completely gutted. And we've got a Cage Kits roll cage in here that's all FD legal. We've modified the seat mounts. We've actually added in new mounts for the seat to get the seat pushed back and further in. We've got a plate there for the Samsonis shifter and for the e-brake. And then on the floorboard, we've got a plate welded down there for the Tilton floor mount pedal assembly. Above that is mounts for the steering column, which we actually are running the factory steering column that is telescoping and height adjustable. So that's the mounts for that. We've got a bracket on the cage over there for the Motec ECU and the PDM, and that's basically like a fuse box, but it's all just circuit boards inside of there. And then further back, we cut out a lot of the sheet metal and stuff that was here. We've got the radium fuel cell mount welded in place here, and then we've got sheet metal that's going to go in and block all of this, and it actually comes back up here and does like a half window, so all of this is open. We've got mounts here for the CSF radiator that mounts in here at about a 30-degree angle. Fan on the back. There's an electric water pump that sits over here, and we've got some other stuff that we've cut out of the back here. The battery box mount used to go down there, and it sat pretty low, so we chopped that out, moved the battery up kind of underneath the passenger rear seat area. And pretty much the last thing on top is the roof. We removed the stock steel roof, and we bought a carbon fiber roof from an F30 M3 that's going to go on top. And then of course the rear wheel tubs were modified, so we cut about 6 inches of the original quarter panel off and made these tubs so we can fit a much larger tire and get a lot more suspension travel out of the car. We've had a lot of great partners on this build. Radium gave us all of the components for the fuel system, so they have an 8-gallon fuel cell, quick fill tanks, I mean basically every filter and regulator that we need. We've got Samsonis, a sequential transmission that we're putting in here. Yeah, we got a quick change diff and all the WiseFab suspension components. So there's a ton of stuff. And then Corteco gave us all the gaskets for the engine rebuild. So that stuff's really great, and it's all coming together, and I'm really excited to get this thing done and on the road.